Hi, and welcome to the Invasive Non-Native Species Monitoring Panels video for Solway Firth Partnership for World Oceans Day 2021. And today we'll be following Claire McFarlane, the Solway Firth Partnership Manager, as she places monitoring panels in different areas around the Solway Firth. So before we speak to Claire and get some answer on some questions about non-native species, first I'll explain some definitions while talking over some clips of Claire placing the monitoring panels. They're placed each May and taken in September to give an indication of the growth of native and non-native species around the Solway. So firstly, I'll provide you with a few definitions which will be helpful throughout the video. Non-native species refers to species which are found beyond their native range. Essentially, this means a species is found somewhere they shouldn't be. They can be introduced through unintentional means, for example, ballast water or careless behaviour or careless release. But they can also be introduced intentionally, often for economic gain from the growth of a species. So you may be wondering why we place these panels in harbours and marinas in the Solway Firth. Well, that's because harbours and marinas are often the first place where you will see a non-native species, and that is because they're often introduced unintentionally through vessels coming into the area. They can be introduced through ballast water or biofouling, which means the organism is attached to the hull of the vessel, and this means that these areas are the first place that you will see the non-native species, potentially before it spreads to other areas. So unfortunately, non-native species can cause damage to the native species, biodiversity, social and economic aspects of an area once they've become established in that area. Once non-native species are aggressively thriving, to the detriment of native species, biodiversity or activities, they are considered invasive non-native species. The classification of a species as a non-native species or an invasive non-native species is specific to the site or species. It is not a blanket classification across the board. So enough of a voiceover. Let's go and talk to Claire out on the coast while she places monitoring panels, first in Stranraer, then Port Patrick, Whitehaven, and finally in Maryport. So what invasive species have been found in Stranraer before?
So we've found some orange-tipped sea squirts which grow on these rough surfaces. We also get Japanese skeleton shrimp. And then we also get a range of invasive species, which is then quite interesting to see what actually lives down here. So we get a kind of combination of both. Then we've got orange-tipped sea squirts here, which is the invasive species. That's quite a distinctive looking thing. We've also got these big seaweed fronds, mussels. This is a type of sponge or porifera. There's one there, here, with an opening on the end. And this is a type of worm. It looks like a little bit of sea lettuce there. So there's quite a few of these little sponge things. There's quite a good orange-tipped sea squirt. You can see it quite well there. That's a good example of sea lettuce. That's a slightly bigger frond, isn't it? Interesting. And there's a sea squirt here. That one, I can't quite tell whether that's orange tipped or not. It could be a native sea squirt. The defining feature is it has the orange tipped, you can see through into their guts, and it has a C-shaped gut in the orange tipped sea squirt. You can't quite see the tract in that one. I'm not quite sure what that one is. Okay, I'll just put that one back. Great. So that'll be interesting.
then.
So that's 4 panels in Whitehaven. And how many do you put in Stranraer on average each year?
So in Stranraer we put in 6, and I suppose that's just because we know there's like one section that has Japanese skeleton shrimp, so we kind of tend to put a panel there, and we put them at the opposite side. So between 4 and 6, we have had a couple that have got lost as well when we've put them out, so we tend to put extra ones there.
And is there a reason we only do certain marinas in the Solway?
Yeah, so we can't do the marinas that are further in the inner Solway because it's too tidal, so the panels have to be covered by water at all time. Otherwise nothing can grow on them. So if the tide goes out and it leaves it very shallow, then so for example at Dromore or Isle of Whithorn, they're just too tidal and they would just be sat in mud and the things wouldn't be able to grow on them.
And despite the Solway being one water body, one estuary, do you see differences on the Scottish side and the English side in terms of invasive species?
Mostly the same species so far, but to be honest, this is the first year we've put it into Whitehaven, so I'll be interested to see what we get here. And we do know that there's a trumpet tube worm is found in Whitehaven, whereas we've not recorded it anywhere else on the Scottish side. So it'll be interesting to see this year what differences and similarities we get.
So what kind of effect could invasive species have if you found them in marinas around the Solway?
So they have an impact on the local biodiversity. So something like a Japanese skeleton shrimp can kind of take over from local native ones who can kind of basically eat the kind of food that they would expect to eat. So it kind of, I suppose it's competition for habitat. But also something like a trumpet tube worm, which is the one species that is sometimes found in Whitehaven. It can actually cover the infrastructure, so the boats or pontoons, and then other species like the livery sea squirt can cause huge problems with like completely smothering everything. So that would smother wildlife and infrastructure, and then there's huge economic costs trying to clean it all up.
So you said they always need to be submerged in water,
Yeah.
but what are the other requirements for where you place the panels?
Well, there's not really any other requirements, I suppose, apart from the fact that if you put it in a very exposed place, then it's more likely to get battered by the storms. So it's more just a case of keeping it fairly sheltered, just so that the panels are protected. And presumably, the types of things that choose to grow are more likely to choose a less exposed place as well. You know, sea squirts and seaweeds and you know, various worms and things like that would grow.
And how do the panels stay in the water? How do they not float up?
Well, they're weighted inside, so each panel has got a kind of fishing weight inside to help hold them down under the water, so they're not going to float.